guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Teacher Raf, and this is another episode of The Matrix. And I want to talk about two things in this episode, very important things. The first thing is the concept of Jesus, the Christ, which Christians understand and many other world religions understand as a prophet, spiritual teacher, and a lot of people question, when is this person coming back? Or when is this Son of God coming back? However their perspective may be formed. That's the first thing. I want to talk about how people are looking at when this might appear. The second thing is that I want you to take a look at this movie called The Chosen from, I believe, 1981. And on screen you can see a review by Roger Ebert. Remember him? Maybe you don't, but that's okay. It's not that important. Basically, Roger Ebert reviewed films for a living. That was his career, and he was very smart, and he was just great at it. Anyway, if we take a real quick look, it'll tell you that this movie is about two young boys, and they're early in their teenage years. One is the son of an intellectual, and the dad is involved in Zionism and the formation of the Jewish state. So this movie takes place in the 40s. And the other boy is the son of a rabbi. And the dad prefers his son to stay out of politics and indeed stay as much as possible out of the modern world. So one boy, the son of the rabbi, grows up with a world perspective that's very ancient, and it's entrenched with tradition, and he develops with rigid discipline. And the other boy, whose father is a sort of a politician, if I remember correctly, and is involved in Zionism, that boy is a very brilliant scholar. And these two boys come together and bond and create a friendship. And they're both raised to ask questions about life and their circumstances. And the reason I'm bringing this movie up as a very great example of understanding is because both of these boys are raised in the Jewish spiritualism, in a Jewish household, but they have different perspectives. One has the perspective that Israel as a nation can be formed by man, by people, by armies, by politicians, you understand? Which happened in history in the 40s, 45, I believe, or somewhere around there. The other boy is raised to believe that the nation of Israel cannot be made by man, but only by the idea of God. And that only God, something that is greater than man and his control, that God only can create the nation of Israel in God's time, right? Basically, that man cannot force a nation to be created, that God has to make it on God's time. Now, whatever you believe, regardless of whatever you believe, this is a great movie to explain the differences of this belief. And of course, things are never black and white. It's always gray, meaning there's some truth in the black and there's some truth in the white. So as history notes, Israel was created by men, but, big caveat, the timing for this creation potentially, possibly, could only be through the fruits of God, right? That the timing is so serendipitous that man wouldn't be able to create that type of timing. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not saying it's true or not. I'm just saying that it's something to really think about. So that's something you should explore on your time. Here's some more articles about this movie taken from the New York Times back in 1982, April 30th. And it talks about sort of the synopsis of what the movie is. And you can read about it here. And there's another website, Movie Phone, 1982. Real quick gist of what this movie is. And of course, if you want to buy it, you can buy to watch it, rent it, buy it, whatnot. It's here on Prime Video, Amazon, it looks like. So those are the things that I'd like for you to take a look at. Okay, now going back to the whole concept of Jesus, and I came upon this website, and it's very interesting because the author of this blog or whatnot delves into the idea of what a generation is in terms of from the Bible's perspective. We think about a generation today such as the greatest generation of World War I, the baby boomers coming out of World War II, Generation X, and then the millennials, and then Generation Z. And that's fantastic, but the word generation, if it's taken from the Bible as this author alleges through his interpretations, he takes certain Hebrew words and then looks at it from the Greek perspective, and it seems to the author that a generation is actually the lifespan of a person during a specific time. And if we're looking at the Bible and when it was written in Hebrew, then it would mean that most people during that time lived to be into their 70s. Okay, that was the highest percentage of people, right? I mean, people lived to be 80s and 90s and over 100, of course, but a very minute percentage of people lived that long. So the first thing that the author wants you to understand is that when interpreting the Bible and looking at it through modern eyes, he wants you to know that a generation is a lifespan. And the reason being is because he quotes the famous idea of the fig tree. Matthew 24:32-34, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near at the doors. Assuredly, I say to you, this generation, there's that key word, will by no means pass away till all these things take place. And then, of course, you can go to this website and read through it and see what you think. But he goes into detail describing that the fig tree, in his interpretation, is the nation of Israel. And then he goes into details as to why he believes this and quotes the Bible and so forth, which is great. It's fine. And then he talks about that certain things will come to pass and that the second coming of this spiritual teacher, Jesus, known to many as Son of God, known to many as a prophet, known to many as a person only. Whether your perspective is this, that, or the other, the author is saying that the return will happen during the lifetime of a single generation. There's that key word again. So if we look at baby boomers, and you can go through and read all this. It's really interesting, actually. I went through it, especially this whole history of these nations in the Middle East and how they sprouted from the British Empire and also from France having colonies. And they all sprouted during a 5-year period. I believe it's between 48 and 53, something like that. But of course, the nation of Israel became a nation in the year 45 or 46, something like that. But if we scroll down to look at what the author says about the generation of the baby boomers, he'll tell you that he believes through his interpretation of scripture and understanding it through modern eyes is that he says he proposes that the baby boomer generation is the generation that will not pass away until the Lord comes back. And he believes this because it is said that the baby boomer generation started in, I believe, 46. It's here someplace. Here it is. 46. And so if you take 1946 and you add on, let's say, I don't know, roughly 80 years, you're going to get 46 plus 80 would be 2026. Okay? What I want you to also think about is that all of these parables and prophecies always state that this spiritual teacher Jesus will come back in 2,000 years. And that, we all have heard this so many times. But I want to ask you a question. Do you know when Jesus passed away? Because, see, the Bible was written approximately 200-ish years after the death of Jesus. Okay, so it's really hard to pinpoint when he passed away, because you have to pinpoint when he was actually born. And there are many passages that foretell of Jesus's birth and talk about that time period. But there are only one or two passages that actually line up with celestial stars and planets in the sky. Okay? And I can show you what I mean by that. But in brief, in short, I want to say that it seems to me through some research that Jesus was born in 6 or 7 BC, about that time period. That's what makes sense to me when I look at the constellations. Okay, and that is from a perspective of that the constellations signify certain events on Earth. Now, whether you believe that or not, of course, that's all opinion, right? Because we don't actually know. But if you look at from the perspective of astrology, and remember that the 3 wise men were 3 wise astrologers, came to visit Jesus, and they followed what? They followed the bright northern star. Now, that northern star wasn't the northern star that we think in our minds, like just a northern star. Through the perspective of astrology, the northern star was an alignment, a conjunction of multiple planets. And that is why I believe Jesus was born in around 6-ish BC, 6 or 7 BC, because that huge constellation formed during that time. And when those planets formed in the sky, they would make up such a brilliant shining object that you could point it out directly and say, look, there's the northern star. Now, whether that's true or not, of course, I can't prove that, but that is my hypothesis. So, long story short, you take 6 or 7 BC, okay, and then you add it to how long was Jesus alive for? He passed away when he was how old? 33? 32, 33? I think he passed away when he was about 33, correct? Now, if you take BC -6 plus 33, you're going to get 27, correct? Now, 27 is the rough estimate because maybe he was born in -7. But I think he was born in -6. Maybe he died when he was 32, but I think he died when he was 33. So for this example, we're going to go -6 plus 33 equals 27. Now you take 2,000 years as this generic amount of time and you add it to 27, correct? Because if he died when he was 33, then you got to go 33 plus the 2,000. But remember, you got to minus that 6 because it's BC. So you get what? You get 2027. Okay? So because it's a rough estimate, maybe it's 2026, maybe it's 2028. But I'm going to go with 2026. So you have this idea that the spiritual teacher will come back around 2026, 27, or 28. And this author puts together his hypotheses depending on his translation and interpretation of the length of a generation. And that's what he's going by. And he comes up with a year that's very similar to what I came up with. Now, I'm not particularly sure why he started with 1948, but it says here, thus we see Israel was a dried tree for about 1900 years, and then miraculously the branch put forth leaves in one day on May 14, 1948. So that's why he started with 1948. And the baby boomers apparently started in 1946. I have to look into the baby boomers a little bit closer, but for the sake of this presentation, we're going to start with 1948, and he adds the 80 years. So it looks like that's the time period. So I just want you to take a look at this and think about it on your own. And this is a really neat article, and if you're interested in this kind of stuff, you should read through it. Perhaps you'll agree with some things, perhaps you'll disagree with other things, but it's very fascinating. I'm fascinated with the whole idea of the constellations and the parables and time and how it comes together as a puzzle. So thank you for listening. Hit like, and remember, be safe.